In this segment, I'm going to explain to you a little bit about how to make a scientific poster, like this one that I made to present at an international conference in 2014. Posters like this are one of the biggest ways that scientists convey things they've learned to one another. Now, one of the goals for this course was that you were going to make a presentation like that to your fellow first-year students. Though that's not going to be possible, I still want you to aim to make this type of poster. And in fact, if you go on to do research here at St. Lawrence, you'll be making more posters like these. So, looking at this poster, what do you notice about it? Well, for one thing, it's big. 48 inches or 4 feet wide by 36 inches or 3 feet tall. That enormous size is really valuable because you can kind of think of this as packing an entire PowerPoint presentation worth of information, or an entire research paper worth of information, into just one piece of paper. Looking at it, you can see up at the top, that top 1/8 of a poster tends to include the title of the poster, as well as the author or authors. In this case, because you are working by yourself on each project, you'll only have your own name up there for author. You'll also notice that the institution is there and that the logos of the institution are up there. In this case, the logos of St. Lawrence and of Berkeley. What else do you notice? Well, one of the things you might see here is that there are an array of different font sizes. Some aspects of the poster, like the title and authors, need to be read from pretty far away. That's about as far away as the camera is set right now. That font tends to be in the region of 72 to 100 points for the title, depending on how long the title is. Other parts of this document are really meant to be read from a range about like where I'm standing right now. In essence, the distance that someone would be at if they came up to the poster to read it. A good font for that is something like 18 point or 24 point. Large, but not crazy big. Last but not least, there are some parts of the document that really only need to be read by people who are very serious about the topic, and they could come in and lean down to read those smaller things. Sections like the references or some of the figure captions can be even smaller, down near 12-point font. Ultimately, it's about deciding the right size for the application. Speaking of fonts, you'll notice that this, because it's meant to be read primarily from far away where legibility is critical, this poster is using a sans serif font. In this case, it's using Helvetica. For your poster, you can use sans serif fonts if you would like, though we'll see some posters in a little bit that also use serif fonts like Garamond or Times New Roman to good effect. One of the things I would recommend is that you can actually use a mix of fonts. Sans serif fonts like Arial or Helvetica or Futura are really good choices for sections that are titles or just names, while blocks of text are typically better with a serif font like Garamond. While we're talking about design as well, you'll notice that this poster has a lot of pictures on it. The places that aren't pictures are instead things like data tables. And that's something that you should hopefully have in your poster as well. You want to be using mostly images and data tables to convey information. If you do have to have text, it should appear in one of two ways. It should either appear as a caption for a figure or table, and your poster, just like a lab report that you might write, should have a caption for every figure. If it's not going to be a figure caption, it should be a bullet point or something similar, pretty brief. You'll notice that this poster that I made some time ago has big paragraphs of text. That's bad. Don't do like I did here. That is, avoid having big paragraphs of text. The place where it's acceptable to have a big block of text is your abstract. And I would say one of the things that it makes sense to incorporate into your poster is the same abstract that you wrote for your research project itself. Now that we've talked a little bit about the overall structure of the poster, let's take a look in at some of the details of how this poster looks. Then we'll go and look at some other examples too. Now that we're up close to this poster, what can you observe? Well, one of the things you'll see is that the poster is divided into subsections. And those subsections were whichever ones made most sense to explaining the ideas. In a lot of the a lot of the posters that I'm going to be showing you, original research was the source of the data for the poster. As a result, a lot of these posters include sections like a background section, some methods, some results, and some conclusions or future work. In a sense, very much like your lab reports. Now, your poster, based on your paper, is going to have a little bit of a different structure because it's going to be based instead on your research, which has more of a past, present, and future of the topic type structure to it. So the sections or subdivisions in the poster that you'll want will be different. Nonetheless, this idea of dividing things up to make it easy to understand is a really important one. Let me also draw your attention to this section over here, the references section. You can see that this poster has references just like a typical paper would. Particularly for your papers, you're going to be getting the figures from the individual articles that you read. And those figures will also be the ones that you use to make up your poster. So as you're reading through papers, you want to look at which figures or tables in those papers are going to help you to best explain the ideas inside them. Let's now go on to look at another poster besides this one. This poster is showing some recent work from students in Dr. Glazier's group. You'll notice that this poster, like the last one, uses bright colors. It uses the St. Lawrence logo. It has the title and authors in large font at the top and uses a smaller font elsewhere. This poster is a little bit better because it has bullet points to explain important information. It also divides up into sections, and those individual sections are made up primarily of figures and data tables. You'll notice that this also has references sections, but that the individual sections, instead of having topics like results, instead here have descriptors like thermodynamics and hydration. You might even recognize a few equations from our own class. You'll also see that almost all of these have a future work section. Though they're quite small in a lot of these projects' cases, in your own paper, that future section is likely to be a bit bigger. Let's go take a look at another poster. This poster, again, is showing a lot of the style that you're hoping to aim for in your own poster. You can see, for instance, that it has a large title at the top with the authors and their affiliations. You can also see that the contents of the poster, other than the abstract, are made up entirely of bullet points, figures, and data tables. In this case, this poster was made with a serif font, and you can see that that works fine as well. You'll notice that in the case of a lot of these posters, some sort of box structure is used to separate the individual sections. Though that isn't required, it can make it a lot easier to understand where one section or another ends. You can see again that pictures, that is primarily figures, are being used to explain to the reader how the project happened. This particular student was working on a project where she was developing a custom piece of software, bringing together concepts that she learned from both chemistry and computer science. So you can see that in her case, she also chose to include screenshots of the computer program that she wrote. You can also see that this paper includes data tables, a future work section, and citations at the end. You should expect that your paper and poster will have quite a few more citations than this, because it will have less original research, that is, original data taking done in the lab, and more information gained from the literature. Here's an example poster that has a rather different style from the ones we've seen before, using a bright blue to get the reader's attention, and using lines rather than boxes to separate the individual sections. That's perfectly okay. You can see in this example that the font is a sans serif font, but nonetheless that the individual sections throughout remain focused primarily on using pictures to explain ideas about what's happening. When there is text, it's rarely more than 1 or 2 sentences at a time. The goal is not to copy and paste your poster or your paper onto your poster. You can see that the majority of the content here is figures. This poster is perhaps most like the one that you might be planning to make, in the sense that it has a fairly large future work section. Do you see anything missing from this poster? That's right, this poster is missing a references section. Now the last of the posters we'll look at today. You might recognize this one from outside my office. You can see that once again it primarily uses figures and data tables to convey information. It has a large title and author list up top and uses bright colors to get the reader's attention. Looking at the individual components, it uses fairly minimal lines to convey the difference between sections. And explains overall how the project works. You've now had a chance to take a look at some of the different types of posters that scientists make to convey their research to other scientists. As you work on making your own poster, remember to keep in mind the design cues and ideas that you saw in these posters, and aim to convey your information in a clear way using primarily pictures and data tables. Ultimately, you want to make a poster that excites the viewer and makes someone want to come over and learn more about your topic.